Alright, welcome everybody. As promised, I released the video talking about the No X challenge, and here is my personal best speedrun of that challenge. This is my normal layout with the splits timer and controller readout just to verify that I am not pressing X. You'll see plenty of examples here of what I talked about. You can press circle in the menus, you never have to press X. We're sticking with Coco. I've debated sometimes switching over to a speed character, but for now I'm sticking with uh, Coco and Engine occasionally. So right when we start, we kind of U-turn in place to get turned right back around and ready to drive backwards right into the first level Crash Cove. So, in case you didn't know, Crash Team Racing can be beaten without ever pressing the X button. The way we do it is we drive backwards until we can get a boost to propel us forward, and then continually get more boosts. Alright, so Crash Cove is pretty simple because there's the boost pad right behind you. Is there really the first few tracks of the run? It doesn't really get complicated at all until at least Sewer Speedway. So these first few tracks are just a good way to kind of establish your rhythm, make sure you're getting the timing down of the drift boosts. And like I mentioned in the video, you generally want to hold on to a defensive item in this first lap, just until you're far enough ahead that you're not really in any danger of getting hit by a missile. Usually, like by the time you finish the first lap, you're well enough ahead that you don't have to worry about it. Yeah, there's the standard Crash Cove shortcut, and everything else about this level is just about staying as tight to the corners as possible. I'm not the greatest at doing that. It's still an element of my gameplay that has to be much more refined, but you know, it works for now. But yeah, not too much to talk about here in Crash Cove. It's pretty basic. We're gonna see a lot more kind of techniques going into future levels. That one's a very basic start. You kind of saw it at the end there, and you know, I'll talk about that later. That's a concept we're gonna see a few times. We'll wait to talk about that, because right now what's about to happen? First of all, well, all right, stay on topic. I mentioned in the video that there's very few places in the overworld where you can get a hang time turbo, and thankfully one of them is right here, and that is a particularly useful spot to have a hang time turbo because you know after every single one of the races in World 1 you can pick it back up, so we get to use it 4 times, and each one saves somewhere between, I want to say, like um, so everyone saves somewhere between 5 and 10 seconds, although the last one saves a lot of time, so we'll see that when we get there. So, Bruise Tubes, we generally want to go forward. When we get to that boost pad, we have a chance to pick up an early boost item, and that is exactly what happened there. That doesn't that's not too far away from the regular boost pad, so it doesn't save that much time, but you know, any time save you can get is absolutely worth it. And in fact, we grabbed another nitro boost item, and that's one we're just gonna hold on to as backup. So there's some speed ghosting that goes on here. When we have those downhill sections, we're kind of doing a drift boost to roll down them as we pass by, and rolling down the hills lets us pick up extra speed beyond our normal boosting speed, and that's called a speed ghost. And then once you've picked up that extra speed, you can hop repeatedly, which is a technique called froggy that just lets you keep that momentum for longer. So you can see that's exactly what was happening there. There was one other thing I wanted to talk about. Oh yeah, at the end of the lap, we have that little jump into the mud section to kind of cut around the final turn. Um, Strictly speaking, I could go under the mushrooms, but it's much tighter to go under the mushrooms. It would save a little bit more time, but it's much riskier because it's a higher chance you'll just like be slightly off and end up hitting something and losing all your reserves, and then you're stranded in the mud. So, for safety's sake, on the first 2 laps, I just go around the mushroom. So one little small thing about this, and it's true in the regular speedrun as well, but I'm constantly noticing it because I'm really bad at remembering what I'm supposed to do. You gotta, like, at the start of every race and at every Aku text box, you have to mash triangle to get out of it as fast as possible. At the end of a race, you have to mash start. Sometimes I get those confused. You saw there we used the overworld hang time boost again, but 2 things happened. One, we messed it up the first time and had to reset up for it. That is still worth it because that's how long it takes to just drive slowly in reverse. But then what also happened is I turned the wrong way. I really was not focusing well during that overworld section, so we lost quite a bit of time. But it's okay because I had gained so much time in Bruise Tubes with the early boost and just generally racing well. So we have another little kind of a small little shortcut in this track as well. Kind of around that first bend, there's a section in the cave with rough ground that you can cut through, but I usually don't try it first lap because um, in the first lap you generally haven't had a good opportunity to build reserves. So it's a little riskier to go for. Even if you do come out of it properly, you could end up not having sacred fire, which arguably makes it not worth it. But you will see in the second and third laps, I do go for this. And that time didn't go well because I did hit the wall and end up losing my reserves anyway, so kind of a moot point. um, but anyway, you can see when we were going through that little cave section, we were also doing that froggy technique, and that works the same way. It's just like the less, especially on rough ground, the less time you spend on the ground, the slower you lose momentum. Yeah, there's not too much else to this track. It can be sometimes tricky to cut corners properly in the fireball jump sections, and that's just a matter of like what timing you're coming into, whether you have the proper cycles in order to dodge the fireballs. As you can see there, that corner in particular, you can always, if you cut it tight enough, you can always dodge the fireball. But some of the like the second 2 of the 3 jumps, at a certain point, you have to start going to the right instead. So that's doing that ideally is just a matter of like, do you have the right signals? So, but yeah, we lost quite a bit of time there. Part of it was from losing reserves in a couple places, but the bigger part of that was messing up the overworld. So that was a thing. I generally try to play under no reset rules when I do runs. I'm not super strict about that, but I try not to reset a run unless it's going especially bad early on. If I'm only 5 seconds behind, that's fine. If I like had to restart one of the tracks altogether, yeah, I'd probably reset that. But we're coming up into Sewer Speedway. We're gonna see something that I mentioned uh, in the main No X video. When we come up to this first boost pad, it takes up the entire width of the track. I did tease that we found a faster way to deal with that, and you're about to see it. I actually did also get a small hang time turbo there, but that's not super consistent, and even then, like you're going straight up a hill. So this is that technique. So that's a variant of U-turning. So, and actually, we saw that in sewer, or no, not. We saw that as well, but I didn't really call it out just because it's more striking there as a way to use that boost pad even though it takes up the full width of the track. So basically what is happening there is doing the same general technique of a U-turn, but I'm not holding down. So the difference there is when you're holding down with the U-turn, you're both turning your cart and redirecting your momentum. But when you don't hold down, you're only turning the cart. Your momentum stays exactly where it was. So what happens is we can turn ourselves around in order to be facing forward, but we still were traveling in the same direction, which let us get onto the boost pad. This big tunnel section there. Um, Better speedrunners have ways to kind of use the sides of the tunnel in order to get a lot of speed ghosting. It's still something I'm learning how to do. If I kind of took more time to just get better at it, I could definitely shave at least a couple seconds off of Super Speedway here, but can't complain too much. Like we mentioned in the main No X Challenge run, the Sewer Speedway shortcut is a little bit riskier. It's generally speaking, it's a consistent shortcut, and most people with a little bit of practice can get it every time. But the risk is that if you do miss it, you're kind of stranded out in the middle of nowhere, and it's not easy to get your momentum back. There is a way to do it, but it's not easy. So this is going to take us into the first boss track. Again, like we mentioned in the main No X video, the problem with the bosses is that the No X restriction forces us to fall behind them, which means we have to dodge around all their items. Ripperoos not usually too bad, but his TNTs can end up causing us to kind of take turns wider than we would like to in order to dodge the TNTs. So it's a thing, but as long as you're careful and you kind of know where the TNTs usually end up being, it's not really a problem. The one thing to note with the boss tracks, I should say, is that in the other tracks, when you've fallen super far behind to last place, like you are forced to do in the No X run, if you grab an item in last place, you've got a chance for uh, a mask item, and the masks are actually super useful because they do increase your boosting speed. But in the bosses, as far as I know, there's no way to get a mask. In all the No X run attempts I've done, I don't believe I've ever gotten one on boss tracks. So it's possible I'm wrong about that, and there is a way to do it, but not that you would normally see in a speed run anyway. So it is what it is. But yeah, and once you get ahead of the bosses, it's pretty much the same as the normal speed run. Once you get ahead, you've really got nothing to worry about. The only thing that could even potentially cause a problem is if you got so far ahead that you started seeing the items they dropped from the previous lap. But in the No X run, that generally doesn't happen just because of the slow start you have to deal with. So, like we mentioned, we use that overworld boost 4 times. If you're counting properly, we've only done it 3 times. We're gonna get to use it one more time. So we don't actually spawn at the um, trophy circle like we do after every other race. We spawn in front of the door or the after Ripperoo. But the next overworld section is super long because you have to go all the way through the bonus hub world. So it is absolutely worth it to take some time to go backwards here. Although it's slightly less worth it if you try to get too cute like I did and end up taking longer to get set up. But as you can see, like we have to go a very long way in the overworld, so it is absolutely worth it to take the time to get the overworld boost again. This section in particular of the overworld is pretty tricky because there's a lot of sharp turns. I usually just end up doing a U-turn there. and it usually works out pretty well. But if you're a little overzealous with the U-turn, you can end up hitting the wall and being forced to do the rest of the overworld driving backwards like normal. So Tiger Temple, I mentioned in the main No X Run video that we go backwards in the tunnel to get the boost pad behind, but we discovered later that it's actually a better strategy to go forward. One of the reasons is that when you go forward, you get to pick up um, a boost, a power up, and when you grab that power up, there's a chance that you will get an early boost, which lets you start off I as soon as you possibly could. But the other reason why we do it is because even if you don't get that overworld boost, if you go up to one of those ramps at the start of the lap, you have just enough height off of the second ramp in order to just drive backwards off of it and get a hang time turbo. So that's why we go forward. I wasn't just counting on getting lucky; it just happened. We do have a backup in case that doesn't happen. But yeah, the rest of this track is pretty basic. We're just like going around the track. We are being very careful about what items we get because we need to have some item that we can use in order to open the shortcut for the next lap. So generally, if you get like TNTs that you can't really use, you would just throw them away and try to pick up a different item. That kind of cut through the grass we did just there. The one thing you got to keep in mind with that grass cut is that if you don't have an item for the shortcut yet, you are passing up one of your opportunities to grab one. So generally, if I don't have the power up I need to open the shortcut yet, I will generally just skip out on that grass cut and go grab another item. So next up is Coco Park. Coco Park's another pretty basic track. Boost pad right behind you. There's a little bit of kind of thought that goes into when to take grass cuts and whatnot, so we'll kind of see that in action. Now this is what overworld sections more typically look like, because we didn't have enough height there to gain a hang time turbo, so instead we have to just drive backwards. And there's a slight bit of speed ghosting that happens, so it is still worth it to kind of like after you drive down a hill, it's still worth it to froggy a little bit. I think it's a very minuscule time save, but it's still worth it to do. You just gotta be careful not to overdo it, because even if you are frogging, you're still losing a little bit of momentum. So if you overdo it, you're actually starting to go slower than if you were just driving backwards normally. So that I mentioned in the No X Run video. If you get hit right at the edge of that tunnel, you're kind of stranded, and you've got to go quite a ways to get to the nearest boost pad. The race isn't over for you, but it is a pretty major slowdown because at the position I got hit, I had to drive backwards all the way up to that. So it's recoverable, but really slow. So that kind of put a damper on the speed run here. But again, no reset rules. I just kind of went with it. So that's the grass cut I'm talking about. It didn't really go well there. You kind of want to just hop as much as you can to stay off of the grass, but it didn't really work very well for me there. But notably, I don't go for that on the first lap, and the reason why is because doing that skips over a turbo pad that we can use to pick up Sacred Fire. It's possible. Well, and actually, another reason to not do it is because like the faster you are going when you go over the grass, the less time you'll have to spend on the grass. So it's kind of doubly worth it to just make sure you've picked up Sacred Fire before you bother with that grass cut. But yeah, you can see 20-second time loss from that enemy item hit. So that's what a lot of enemy hits can do for you. Some can even be a lot worse than that. Um, I think there are certain places, none are coming to mind immediately, but there are definitely places in certain tracks where if you get hit, you like legitimately have to restart because you're just that far away from the nearest boost pad. So we're entering a section that I always consider basically the hardest section of the run. We're gonna have like 5 races right in a row that can all easily go badly. I don't really consider a run to have too much potential until I'm past these next 5 levels. And first one is Papu's Pyramid. We have an opportunity for a early boost item. I got a little overzealous and pressed circle a few too many times and accidentally wasted the Aku power up that I had gotten. But more notably here, we're seeing that like hopping backwards up a hill that I kind of mentioned earlier that we were doing in Crash Cove. So um, that's a common thing that speedrunners know of, where like if you're going up a slight uphill, if you repeatedly hop over it, you'll slowly gain momentum. It turns out this is also true when you're just driving in reverse up a hill. You could probably tell, like, as we were going up that section and hopping, we were slowly gaining momentum. And here's another interesting little bit of tech here. I got an Aku item which is really good, but I got it as I was about to go into the um, pyramid section. Going into the pyramid section with an Aku is generally a really bad idea because it's already pretty tight at normal speed. When you get the Aku and boost your speed, it becomes just even more difficult to do properly. So I generally will just save the Aku until I'm past the pyramid. One of the more difficult things to do with this race is to maintain Sacred Fire through the pyramid section. One of the reasons for that is just because it's a very tight section. You can easily hit a wall and lose all your reserves. And the other is sometimes, like especially towards the last few turns, you have to shorten your drift boost in order to make the turn properly, which means you're not getting as much reserves as you normally would. So you're both low on reserves and at high risk of hitting the wall. So it's pretty difficult to maintain fire through the pyramid section. It's still something I'm trying to get better at. Um, there's another thing I could mention about Papu's Pyramid, but I'll wait on that since we have to do it again here shortly. So right here we trip the boss garage text box because you're essentially forced to trigger it somewhere. So we just kind of pick a spot to do it where it wastes the least amount of time, and that's where a lot of runners end up doing it. So we're going into Dingo Canyon. The Dingo Canyon especially is one of the trickiest races in the No X. Um, so obviously the ideal thing to happen would be is if you grabbed a Nitro Boost power up in the first set of item boxes, because that lets you get started as soon as possible. It only takes you like it takes you less than 20 seconds to get started instead of nearly a minute if you had to drive all the way backwards to the boost pad. But notably, it is still possible if you have to drive all the way to the boost pad. So it's not the end of the world if you don't get that early boost, but especially in the speedrun, oh boy, does it help. Um, I was a little. I got the very good RNG of the early boost pad, but unfortunately I didn't. I got 2 more item boxes, but unfortunately I didn't get an Aku in either one of those. Normally, if you don't get the early boost, you have to basically drive until like halfway through the third lap in last place, which gives you an opportunity to get quite a few Akus in. make up some time that way. But we didn't get any there, but the early boost still more than makes up for that. I would hazard a guess that every Aku saves like 1 maybe 2 seconds, but the early boost saves like 30. So not getting any Akus after you got an early boost is absolutely nitpicky, and I should be ashamed of myself for complaining about it. But yeah, this is very atypical of what Dingo Canyon looks like. This is an excessively lucky Dingo Canyon. I don't remember where I saw it, but I remember hearing that the chance to get a Nitro Boost power up is essentially 10%, essentially 1 in 10. So 9 times out of 10, Dingo Canyon is going to go the much longer, slower way. So when you do get that early boost, appreciate it. So we're going into Papu Papu now. We're going back to Papu's Pyramid. So the thing I was mentioning earlier is we take 2 shortcuts in Papu's Pyramid. And actually notably with the Papu fight versus the normal races that Papu drops potions everywhere, and sometimes those potions end up in places where it's just in the way of your approach to the shortcuts, and sometimes you just have to make a decision for safety to pass up on one more of the shortcuts. But the other thing I was going to mention, the second shortcut that we do, that kind of hop over the gap to skip the final U-turn. What was I going to say? There's a better version of that shortcut where you basically get up onto the section where the track crosses itself, and from there you hop onto the railing and go straight to the finish line. Like kind of right up there, you would go up above on the arch or on the roadway above, use that to get onto the railing, and just hop straight to the starting line. It is definitely possible to do it in the no X run, um, but it's not the easiest thing to do, and I haven't practiced it a lot, which is why I'm not going for it here. There's also like I could do a little bit better if I got into the habit of going for the grass cut in that section right as we come out of the pyramid. Um, I think one of the reasons I haven't really I've never really actively thought to do that is that I'm still not great at coming out of the pyramid section with Sacred Fire, which definitely helps. If you're coming out without Sacred Fire, generally you don't have very good reserves, and going through the grass is risky. So I think it's just a matter of I would both need to get better at maintaining Sacred Fire, and um, I would need to actually remember to do it, because there are a lot of times where I think about doing it, but then, or well, there are a lot of times where I pass right by it and then realize, wait, I should have taken the grass cut. And yeah, right there was an example. As I was approaching the final shortcut, I saw that Papu dropped a potion, kind of right at the edge there. Probably could have squeezed through it, but it was tight enough to make me think better of it. Just because hitting that potion, that would cost something like 30 seconds. I'm pretty sure I still would have won the race because I was far enough ahead of Papu at that point. But uh, just as far as time loss, it's really not worth it. So yeah, it's a safe decision, but one I'm comfortable making. So yeah, any of the overworld sections where you have to go into the next world are pretty long. It's just that one after you finish the first world is especially long because you have to go all the way through the bonus hub as well. Um, this one's not too bad, but it's still noticeably one of the longest overworld sections in the game. So right here we do a minor little trick here where we stop looking backwards as we enter Blizzard Bluff, and all that does is it prevents lag frames. Because normally if you're looking at Blizzard Bluff as you enter it, you're kind of seeing that whole background, and the game is trying to render too much at once, and it causes some lag frames. So if you just don't look at the Blizzard Bluff portal as you enter it, you save a little bit of time by cutting out lag frames. So yeah, we just drive for Blizzard Bluff. We just drive backwards to that boost pad and get going. I take that small little snow cut every time just because it's a very short section. It saves like a second or two, and you're in no real danger of losing Sacred Fire through that. The trickier shortcut here is the rail jump, because sometimes that rail jump is really finicky. Still haven't gotten totally consistent with it. I haven't like figured out a specific place to line up for it and a specific place to do the hops to get over it. I'm sure better speedrunners do have specific places, or like just, I don't know what the word I'm looking for. It's like specific landmarks that they're looking for in order to line up the jump, but I haven't figured that out yet. So it's mostly YOLOing, but it worked out for me in this run. We hit the rail jump twice. The river jump, it's really not that hard. You just gotta make sure you have Sacred Fire from the boost pad by the boulder. So a very interesting thing happened here. I kind of had a weird angle on the river jump, and that caused me to just barely clear it. In fact, I so barely cleared it that the game considered me to have clipped the edge of the uh, side across the river, and that caused me to lose reserves. And at that point, I was like, okay, I have to just skip the third rail jump, which is a bit of a shame, but it is what it is. So yeah, you're gonna see another case of us hopping backwards up a small incline to gain some momentum. I should note that that only works over slight inclines. If you have a massive incline, trying to think of a good example, but I can't really think of one. But if it's a really sharp uphill, it kind of works the opposite way. Hopping up it will just stop you dead in your tracks. So it only works over slight uphills. And so this is the last of the 5 gatekeeper tracks I consider them to be. And the reason Dragon Mines is so hard is because of the spiral at the end of the track. Normally, because it's a fairly tricky track, normally if I had gotten an early boost, I would have just held on to it as a backup in case I messed up the spiral on one of the next few laps. But for whatever reason, I decided to actually go for it this time. It's the first time I ever got early boost and decided to actually use it instead of saving it here. And worked well for me because it's working well so far because I haven't messed up the spiral, and that allowed me to catch up to the AIs a lot quicker. Normally, I wouldn't really pass them back into first place until kind of towards the end of the second lap. In this run, that happened at the very end of the first lap, so catching up to them a lot faster. And yeah, we're just kind of going along smoothly. I always throw away items when I'm in first place to try to grab a backup boost in case I do mess something up, especially in a tricky track like this where there's certain sections where it could very easily go wrong. Did not end up finding up that backup boost, but ended up doing the spiral well enough to get through. The last one was a little bit sloppy because you can see I had very little momentum and I only just barely got off the boost that kept me going, so cutting it close there, but it's enough to get it done, and we can see that using the early boost saved about 10 seconds. It's not the biggest time save from an early boost. The biggest is by far Dingo Canyon. That's like at least a 20-second time save. I would say probably closer to 30 seconds, but there might be some factors that I'm not really considering there, but you know. So we're going on to Polar Pass. once I get a run to Polar Pass that is ahead of PB, that's when I start to consider it like, okay, this has a realistic chance of PBing because we're through the most difficult section. We've gotten through all those 5 tracks in a row that are very tricky and could easily go wrong. And that's not to say these last couple tracks aren't tricky and can't go wrong, but um, like I don't hype myself on a run until I'm through those 5 that we just got through. So Blizzard Bluff, or this is not Blizzard Bluff, this is Polar Pass. Um, we have to take quite a while to get to the first boost pad, but it's not a big issue having to take that long because it's a pretty long track and we have plenty of time to catch up. So there's a shortcut here. It's a very swag shortcut. We do that 180 turn that we had been using in order to get our momentum started. Instead, we use it to turn ourselves around, hit the boost pad, and try to hop onto that railing to cross the river. It's a shortcut that I am not super consistent with it yet, and there's actually a couple ways that it could go very, very wrong. So I always promise myself I'm only going to try this once. Well, at least for now, I promise myself that I'm only going to try it once. If I kind of figure something out that helps me get it more consistently, I probably would go for it every time. And it's also not too punishing if you miss it because there's that boost pad right there that you can easily get back to. So it's not the most punishing if you miss it. And actually, the worst way to miss it would be if you did cross the river, but then didn't get the right turn and it ended up falling off of that narrow section, because then you're really stranded. So that's actually the bigger risk than like outright failing the shortcut, is making it but then falling off the edge. So there's another smaller cut we kind of do right up here. It's a cut that only really works if you have Sacred Fire, which we had lost on the first lap, which is why I didn't go for it. But doing that just cuts out like a second or two by skipping the... well, it's not even necessarily because it skips the ramp, it's just that it cuts that corner a lot tighter. But yeah, those kind of 2 jumps onto those small islands with boost pads, you gotta be very careful with that because, especially if you've got Sacred Fire and you've got good speed working with you, it's very possible to accidentally jump too far and completely miss the island and fall right into the river. So that's just a section you got to be careful of. But of course, if you were to get consistent at the shortcut and can do it every time, you never have to deal with that. So, strictly speaking, that's only a concern for the lesser speedrunners who can't do the Polar Pass cut as well, like I can. That came out wrong. I'm trying to say I'm also one of the noobs that can't do it. Anyway, moving on. We've got Tiny Arena. Tiny Arena is the same way that it is in the normal speedrun. It is basically the long, boring track with not a whole lot interesting going on, and it's just so much less exciting than every other track in the speedrun. Because we got the boost right behind us, so it's not even a difficult start. The only really difficult thing about it is um, there are kind of long stretches where if you haven't gotten yourself far enough ahead of the AI, you can end up getting hit with items and getting set back pretty hard. So, and the other thing that makes it especially annoying is the fact that most of those item boxes are in mid-air, which makes it just especially easy to miss them altogether and not pick up any items, which is really bad. Because as you can see there, having a protective item is really useful. But yeah, that's pretty much all that's going on with Tiny Arena. Strictly speaking, that was a mistake because I didn't realize just how close the AI still were to me. And It could have gone really bad if that bomb hit me, but we ended up being fine. And now I've pretty much got all the separation I need in order to just absolutely crush the AIs here. Yeah, like once you're far enough ahead and you don't really have to worry about the items anymore, it's just about execution. And that's not to say the execution is easy, because especially with all these tight turns and managing your reserves, and especially these uphills, because kind of the way your momentum is handled when you're going up and down hills rapidly is pretty finicky, and I still haven't really optimized it. But yeah, that's pretty much all there is to the track. Just a lot of tight turns to manage, and kind of managing your momentum going up and down lots of small bumps. And we've still got like another minute and a half. I've run out of things to talk about on this track, and we've still got another minute and a half. I'm realizing why speedrunners don't like this level. There's only so much you can say about it, but it's so much longer than all those things you can say. You can see there that was kind of a instance of really bad momentum management with the uphills, because you can kind of see a pretty sharp slowdown on that jump that we had a moment ago. Don't worry though, once we get past Tiny Arena, the run gets more interesting again. First and foremost, because we have to go right back to Dragon Mines, so the difficult tracks are coming back now. But yeah, snooze, resident sleeper. Tiny Arena is a snooze fest when you're trying to commentate it. You quickly run out of things to talk about. Um, so yeah, we're going to Komodo Joe. I should say this is a good time to mention because I'm playing on an NTSC emulator. The reason I'm reminded about that is because the PAL version of this game actually has a way to skip this super long cutscene with Komodo Joe. Um, but from what I've heard from the speedrunning community, there's other things that are slightly faster about NTSC that essentially make that a complete wash. But the thing that's not a wash about me playing on emulator is that, um, strictly speaking, the fastest way to play this game is on a PS2 Slim with fast disk speed to reduce loading time. So, strictly speaking, I am at a disadvantage for playing this on emulator. Um, but you know what? We're just doing this for fun. No, if I wanted to get competitive times and show that I'm the best at this game, I wouldn't be playing the fucking No X run. This is just for fun. And actually, I kind of glossed over it there, but it happened again. That Dragon Mines race earlier. That was the first time I've ever taken an early boost on this track. And funnily enough, the on the second pass of that track later in the same run, we got it again. So this right here, this was a little bit manga-esque for me because I'm used to catching up to Komodo Joe at a later point in the track, so I'm more used to kind of where I need to go to dodge all the TNTs. So that was the first time I've ever passed Komodo Joe in a place other than the usual spot. So I was kind of freaking out a little bit, like, oh god, is he gonna hit me? But it ended up totally fine. And the the spirals are going off without a hitch. It was a little bit suboptimal there because I kind of didn't line up my drift boost well enough to actually gain Sacred Fire. I had no reserves by the time I hit that boost pad, so lost fire and didn't really have enough time to get it back, but it's fine. It's kind of nitpicky because it's tricky to get up the spiral in the no X challenge just because of how much momentum you have to lose and how quickly you need to get a boost off. So it's neither here nor there. I'm happy as long as I get through it is basically what I'm trying to say. And once again, we saved another 10 seconds, so this round is going really well. My PB before this was a 109.50, as you can see on the splits there. I had told myself that I kind of kept this on. I kept this run to myself for the most part. For a very long time once I started doing it, and I told myself I would finally share this run with the world once I achieved my goal of a sub 110 run. I did end up getting that sub 110 run, but then I was really disappointed with how it ended to the point where I was like, no, I need at least one more better PV before I share this run with the world. And well, I'm sharing it with you now, so clearly I succeeded. Yeah, one last particularly long overworld section, but even this is not too bad. One interesting thing here is like you can kind of see that ramp up to the save screen. I was tempted at a couple points to try to use that ramp to gain a hang time turbo to get one last overworld boost in the run, but I was never able to find a good way to do it. All the ways I tried where you can actually get the boost and gain momentum, it also kind of turns your cart in a direction where you're just going straight to the wall and you can't actually get down the corridor to engine lab. So I was never able to find a way to make that work. So we don't. There's a temptation to see if you can make that work and just save a couple seconds, but so far it's been fruitless for me. But yeah, we see another instance. Boost pad is taking up the entire track, so the 180 turn is especially useful there. Otherwise, we would not be able to start very reliably. You can you can do the whole like stupid jam yourself against the wall strat like I did in the main no X run video, but the 180 turn is clearly much faster. So basically, throughout this entire section of the throughout the majority of the track, we are just trying to build reserves as much as we can, and then we hit that boost pad to gain USF and kind of speed through the last portion of the track. Yeah, the fact that it ran out where it did meant I really didn't have too great reserves, but it also kind of worked out anyway because like right where it ran out, I was kind of heading straight towards a ledge before a sharp turn, so it kind of worked out anyway that it ended when it did because it just made that turn that much safer. So you won't hear me complaining about it. But yeah, there's a lot of little cuts you can do on those kind of ramp corners, just to, cause like we mentioned, a lot of speed running this game is just about cutting your corners very well in order to save as much time as possible. Like each individual corner cut might like only save you a tenth of a second, but if you can do tons of them over the course of an entire race, that's easily a couple seconds there. A tenth of a second is probably a very low estimate. So depending on the kind of corner, it could be as much as like half a second if you do it really well compared to a really bad corner cut. But it's neither here nor there. I'm just kind of rambling at this point. Yeah, just about building reserves, cutting corners, and getting that USF. So engine labs is pretty easy. I think it's very rare that I have any sort of a major mess up on engine labs. The only place it could really go bad is if you were to fall down one of the pits in the USF section, because from the that USF section, the only way to get momentum back is to go all the way up to that boost ramp at the start of the level. So while I was rambling on about that, we missed the last instance of overworld boosting. We can jump off the trophy circle to boost into Cortex Castle. Really only saves a couple seconds, but yeah, I've always found that one pretty fun. Just just because that was the first instance of overworld boosting that I realized you could do. Like I found that so early. It was in the original No X run. But yeah, Cortex Castle in particular, you'll notice it has lots of sharp corners. Like there's literally only a select few turns in the entire track that aren't 90-degree turns. So it can be pretty tricky to kind of navigate all those corners while also trying to focus on building momentum. And that's not something I'm very good at, because a lot of times what happens in Cortex Castle, if I panic about making those corners, and then my timing on the drift turbos just gets off. I start hitting them too late and not getting very good reserves. So a lot of my potential improvement on Cortex Castle just comes down to stop being such a panicky little um, don't know what word I was looking for there, but the one that came to mind I'm not gonna say. Stop being such a panicker and just be able to still drift boost well and actually build reserves, because you want good reserves, because there's another small little USF section. It's not the most major USF section ever, but it's still worth it to get as much as you can from it. And I'm not the best at getting the most I can from it. The amount of USF I am getting here, it's for my standards, it's pretty good, but for the standards of, like, a better speedrunner, it's like not nearly good enough. And especially my lack of good reserves on Cortex Castle is on full display there, having totally lost reserves like in the first half of the lap. Not even at the halfway point of the lap, I've lost reserves. So yeah, lots of room for improvement on Cortex Castle if I just get better at reserve management. But Cortex Castle is another one of those tracks that rarely goes so wrong that I have to reset the track. Uh, it's not to say it doesn't happen, but it's very rare. Um, Both Cortex Castle and Engine Labs they're I consider them difficult just because they're difficult to optimize. They're not really difficult to complete. There's not a whole lot that can go so wrong that you gotta reset. Hot Air Skyway is different in that regard. Depending on what shortcuts you want to take, Hot Air Skyway can easily go very, very wrong. So there are two major shortcuts on Hot Air Skyway. The first one is a super shortcut where you basically jump down from this highest point of the track near the start of the lap and drop down to the section right after the big spiral and then the massive jump. That shortcut is definitely possible in the No X run still, but I am not nearly consistent enough with it to go for it. If I tried out of 3 times, I would probably nail it once. And the problem with that is that missing that shortcut is really bad because it leaves you stranded with no boost nearby to recover from. So I just play that section normally. The second shortcut, there are 2 ways to do it, and at the time of this run, I had only recently discovered the shorter, safer way to do it, which is what you saw there. Like when you have that ultimate sacred fire from the super turbo pad, you have enough momentum from that to just like run off the track at that little turn. And basically what happens is Coco hits the underside of the track at a later point, and doing that causes the game to basically not register that was supposed to have fallen into the abyss. So it lets you get away with it and fall down to the later section. And actually, that same thing happens with the super shortcut. But yeah, like we mentioned, this is basically a safer version of a different shortcut you can do, and that different shortcut is to actually jump this railing you're going to see right here. Normally you have to pass through it first on the left side, but if you get to the end of that left side and then turn around, you can jump over the railing and hop instantly over to the right side. That shortcut, so I am semi-consistent with that shortcut. Out of 3 times, I would probably nail it at least twice, but again, the problem is if you miss it, you're stranded out in the middle of nowhere with no boost or with no way to get your momentum back. So the way I kind of think about that shortcut is if I have a backup boost, I'll try the better version of the shortcut. If I do not have a backup boost, I'll take the slower, safer way. Although notably, I did not take it there because as I was approaching it, I didn't have good reserves, and my USF ran out, so I would not have had enough momentum to even be able to do it, so I had to just bail out of that. Yeah, so yeah, a lot of improvement on harder Skyway. If I were to... the biggest thing for me would be to learn the super shortcut, because if I could actually start getting that consistently, that would do 2 things for me. First, it would be a major time save in and of itself to start doing the super shortcut, and also, I feel like it would make it a little bit easier to set up the bridge jump, or the rail jump, I guess I've been calling it. So yeah, a lot of improvement on harder Skyway, but like I mentioned, I'm not super concerned with being like the best Crash Team Racing speedrunner ever. I'm just doing it for fun at this point, and that's a healthy way to think about it. Like you can't be thinking of it like, oh, I gotta be the best right away. You gotta just have fun with it and kind of add in tricks as you get more comfortable with them. So I'm not bothered by the fact that we're not trying the best shortcuts because I would get a lot fewer runs deeper because I'm not consistent enough at them, so I'm not bothered by it. Oxide Station. Oxide Station is one of the easier tracks to do in the No X run. Is part of that is because there's a lot more boost pads basically everywhere throughout the track, so pretty much wherever you might get hit by an enemy or hit a wall, you basically always have an option to recover. And also, there's that the the unintended shortcut. Uh, the way you know it's unintended is because the Oxide Ghost in Time Trial does not use it. um, I'm sure a lot of people know what that was like as a kid, like racing all the Oxide times in time trial mode. It teaches you. It does a few things. One, it's just like a very fun challenge to try to beat, and also watching how Oxide's Ghost tries to beat the track teaches you some shortcuts. But that was a shortcut that Oxide does not use, which is the biggest hint that the devs did not intend it. But it's legitimately a huge time save. It saves somewhere like 20 seconds. I think just under. Actually, no, it's over 20 seconds. Because I think like normally a lap on the track would be somewhere like 110 to 112, but with the shortcut you can pretty consistently get like a 52. So I mean, yeah, maybe right around 20 seconds. I don't know the exact numbers. There is a bigger shortcut in Oxide Station, but that bigger shortcut, I think it is legitimately one of the few shortcuts in the game that is not possible in the No X run. Like, it's possible that there is some way to do it, but it's certainly not easy, and it may legitimately require you to have a nitro boost item in order to do it, just because what's involved in that shortcut is running into the railing on purpose in order to hop onto the railing and jump down onto a later part of the track. So, um, like, the only way for you to maintain momentum in the no X run is to have reserves, and it's a shortcut that literally forces you to lose your reserves, which is um, the biggest part of my suspicion that the Oxide Station super shortcut is legitimately not possible in the no X run. We could do sub 108. But yeah, only two races left. We've got Pinstripe and Oxide. They both kind of make the last two tracks trickier. I would say Pinstripe is the bigger issue. The reason why is because it re- the biggest thing it has to do with is it's just a matter of where on the track you start to catch up with Pinstripe. Normally, if you're not taking shortcuts on Harder Skyway, the place where you start catching up with Pinstripe is right in the middle of a section where there's no boost pad. So if you get hit by the bombs he throws, you're stranded. I've been saying that a lot, especially with regards to Hot Air Skyway, because Hot Air Skyway, if you haven't noticed, there's not a lot of boosts around the track. And also, it's a very, I think there's, if I'm doing my math right, there's 5 total uh, turbo pads, and this is, they're spread out very far and wide across one of the longest tracks in the game. So you really don't have a lot of, there's not a lot of places throughout the track where it's safe to get hit, where you can recover easily. Most places for you to get hit, you're kind of fucked. But I kind of subtly mentioned it there. That's if you don't use the shortcuts. If you do make use of the shortcuts, you can pass Pinstripe much sooner, and really you would only have to deal with like 1 or 2 bombs like I did there. Depending on what happens, you could. It's entirely possible you wouldn't have to dodge any bombs. Um, but yeah, like nailing one of the shortcuts, it gets you super far ahead of Pinstripe. You've got nothing else to worry about from this point on. So it's just a matter of making sure you don't make a big mistake that forces you to fall right back behind. And you know, in this whole time, I haven't even mentioned what's happening with this super turbo pad here. That ramp, that's a super turbo pad, so that gives you USF, which is why we don't take the little mini shortcut there on the super jump, because uh, you would have to actively jump, which means that when you land, you get a hang time turbo, and that overrides the USF. So you gotta just do it the normal way in order to. I'm losing my words. You gotta just take that jump normally in order to keep the USF and get some momentum. You can see right there, I mess up the U-turn. That's what happens when you try to U-turn, but you're not pressing down. That's what happens when you do an unintentional 180, basically. Um, and if you were paying attention while I was rambling, I didn't attempt the shortcut on the second lap, and the reason why is because I was at the end of a really good run, and I was getting very nervous, especially with how near I was to missing the shortcut on the second lap. So I got very nervous and didn't want to risk it. But because I had found a Nitro Boost backup item in the second lap, I decided, you know what, I am gonna go for it on the third lap. So yeah, you know what, I hit in both passes of Hotter Skyway. I hit the shortcut 2 out of 3 times. That being said, it is the slower of the 2 versions of that shortcut, so uh, not saving as much time as I could have. But you know, I've already admitted that Hotter Skyway could be way faster if I just get more consistent at the better shortcuts. But yeah, even with the just 2 passes of the minor shortcut, that still left me 2 minutes ahead of PB going into Oxide Station. So, well, not Oxide Station. This is the proper Oxide fight. So I was kind of doing the math on my splits here, and I realized that I've got a good chance of getting a run under 1 hour and 8 minutes if I just don't mess up Oxide. So, in general, just there's only two things that can go wrong with the Oxide fight. The first is if you kind of fail to get around his initial items band and end up taking a few hits on your way to the first shortcut. And speaking of which, the second way you can mess up is if you were to miss one of the shortcuts. You would think that this is rare. You would think that it's rare to mess up a shortcut because it's a very easy shortcut. Despite it being a totally unintended shortcut, it's very easy. You have a lot of room to make that shortcut. There's a wide area where you can make the jump and still clear the railing. The bigger problem is not the tightness of the shortcut. The problem is that this happens at the very end of a run. So if you've got a good run going, nerves are a factor. And it is definitely a factor for me. I've had a number of runs where I got towards the end of a very good run and then just totally flubbed the shortcut multiple times. And in fact, that is what happened in that first sub 110 run I did. The reason I was so ashamed of that first sub 110 is because it should have been a way better run than it actually was, but I missed the shortcut multiple times on Oxide Station. I was just like, no, I that was too weak of an ending. I can't that be my run public with. But you know what? I kept going and got another really good run a little bit later, so worked out. So yeah, we're well ahead of Oxide. There's not really any point where we'll ever have to dodge this item again. So the only two things that can go wrong in the next two passes of the shortcut. There's one. So we're still on track for sub 108. Yeah, this like kind of section at the end of the lap in particular, it's pretty tricky to cut the corners as tight as you can without hitting a wall somewhere, just because there's a couple tight corridors and a lot of sharp continuous turns. And the thing that just adds on top of it is that there's a lot of small hills in this section, which can just make controlling that much trickier. So here we come. And there's actually a USF section there, but I'm not very good at holding it there. So last shortcut upcoming, and I missed it. That hurts. It hurts to have missed that shortcut because that directly costed me sub 108. But you know what? I'd only missed it once. It costed time, but it didn't like totally kill the run. It still felt like a really good run. So I'm okay with missing it there at the end. It's a bit of a shame because it costed 108, but it's not enough that it's not enough that I'd be ashamed of the run like I was with the first sub 110. It still felt like a really good run regardless, even though it ended poorly. But yeah, there we have it. That is Crash Team Racing without pressing X in 1 hour, 8 minutes, and 11 seconds. I encourage everyone to try it for themselves. Have a good day.